Good afternoon. I'm Win Black with Scott Newman, Assistant General Manager, and we're here to present the 2021 budget summary. You earlier just received a large 46-page summary of our budget with other homeowner rules, regulations, which I hope you will at least get familiar with. But today we will just concentrate on a summary of the budget itself and go from there.
We hope you enjoyed this presentation. We typically would be meeting with you in person in the community room at a town hall meeting, but we're meeting here in the multi-purpose room. Mr. Black and I are socially distancing and wearing our masks, so I think we're meeting all the COVID-19 restrictions. And if you have any questions about the presentation today, I can let you know first off, the slides are going to be uploaded to the Smith Ranch Homes website during our presentation. So don't worry about making too many notes on what you see today. Those slides will be available to you, and we'll also have some contact information for you at the end of the show if you'd like to reach out to Mr. Black or I about any specifics.
For today's agenda, we'll be looking first at the operating results that we use actual numbers through September, and then Scott extrapolated from that to get the year-end assumed results. Then we go into the budget assumptions. And thirdly, the budget summary, and then the impact of COVID-19 on our operations here. On the slide you see now, we show the effect that the COVID-19 has had on our expenses. Administration was under budget, about $80,000, but maintenance was above budget, mainly caused by the COVID preventing us from going into the units to service people, so we lost the revenue for that part. Housekeeping and resident services both are under budget, primarily due to being able to reduce the compensation.
And one of the items to note here is that this is a projection. We aren't sure, but we are projecting this based off the 9 months that we do have as actuals. Yes. So we are projecting ourselves to be $674,000 under budget by the end of the year.
Right. As you can see, the large savings came from the dining services, which was a tremendous impact there. And that was the expenses primarily reduced people, staffing, and the agency staffing. Secondly, the cost of food was reduced, and that accounted for the major part of that reduction. Going over to the revenue side, operations lost money mainly because of the being able to not rent the rooms out. COVID put pretty much a stop to that, and in the fact that we couldn't generate revenue with the residents for services they usually require. The other large one, once again, is dining. Guest meals were a large impact, usually around $100,000 a year. And secondly, in the lounge area, we generate something under $100,000 there, both of which were terminated. So pretty much that was the loss there. So then we have the net excess there of revenue there of $330,000.
Which for the viewers at home is really just the net difference between these expected expenses under budget, but then the lost revenues, which is often forgotten during this COVID time, for that 330 net excess.
Then also we applied for the funds through the payroll protection program. We actually retained $216,000, but we were able to have gotten about $900,000, but we felt we really didn't need that, and so we stuck with the $216,000. That right now is shown as a liability in our program until we get government approval to change that into a grant, which then would become one of our assets. Then several expense items that we had in operations were moved into the reserve part, as we felt that those were capital improvements rather than operating expense. Then the city of San Rafael required that we add some work to our elevator work that we're doing in our $2 million project there, but they added some $60,000 of requirements to that. And then we had the big surprise, and that was the breakdown of our sprinkler system in the villas. Originally, that was forecast to be close to $1 million expense, but with the use of a consultant and some work on the units, we discovered we could reduce that to $558,000 bill, which put us about $44,000 in the red in total. So the verdict is the savings that we got from COVID were offset a lot by our lost ancillary revenues, which the rental rooms, the bar, meals with our guest meals. And then we used the rest of that fund with two projects. One was the elevator, additional fees that we hadn't anticipated, and then the fire sprinklers. But the good news was essentially it was a dollar for dollar trade-off of what we were able to gain from the COVID-19 effect with this reduced expense of, but still considerable, for the fire sprinklers in the villa. Had we had not had the benefit of the savings from COVID, we probably would have had an extraordinary special assessment for our residents. No, I love this next screen that you're going to see. I adopted this as my mantra back when I was in high school, and it was nice that Scott brought it up as we.
I didn't even know that. We just somehow clicked on this.
Grope our way through the remaining effects of COVID-19. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Scott, who will then guide us through the budget summary.
Thank you, Mr. Black. And again, I think the map really is a testament about how we were planning for 2021. Most businesses are in this challenging position where how do you predict what's unpredictable? And news changes on a daily basis. There was a vaccine just this week that seems to be very positive, but we needed to, earlier in the process, identify what are our goals for 2021, especially from a resident perspective. First is to try to keep as realistic of a plan as possible despite this uncertain future. Our position for 2021 is to be as moderate as possible. We know what the residents went through in 2020, which was paying a full assessment without much of a change in it, or with no change in assessment, although there was a reduction in services. So our best guess is trying to limit a over or underfunding of operations. We have a blended approach, which we'll talk about shortly, but our goal is to try to come somewhere in the middle so that we don't have to come back to you later on in the year for more money if we miss the mark, or to come back for you and give you money back if we undershot or overshot our goal. We're also mindful of the financial effect of you, the homeowners at home. Investment income, the market has been tumultuous, and we understand that Social Security, which we'll point out a little bit later, has an effect for residents here, that your cash flow is as challenging as COVID-19's challenges. Our prioritization, though, at the same time while managing a property like this, is to prioritize resident life safety projects. A lot of other items could perhaps be deferred for another day, but the life safety projects could not be and should not be deferred. And at the end of the day, you have an investment in this property. Our goal is to maintain a highly serviced association, albeit within tier restrictions and COVID-19 restrictions, and also preserve your community value. Later on in the process, managers, the board, and the finance committee all collaborated to determine some assumptions. We usually use assumptions in our reserve study, but we needed one in our budget preparation, because if we can't agree on a basic set of assumptions, then we'll always disagree with the results. The first assumption was that COVID-19 will affect our operations until a vaccine is widely available. Our goal 6 months ago, or assumption, was that there will be a widely available vaccine in the middle of 2021. So essentially, we split up the budget with 6 months of a COVID operation and 6 months without a COVID operation. I think our projections and our assumptions may be nearing to actually being pretty true. Even with the recent news of some progress, we don't think that an actual vaccine wouldn't be available for everybody until middle of next year. Thus, our budget figures are based off of the 6 month COVID, 6 month non-COVID. So it actually worked out as kind of a nice operation where we created a full budget, that's COVID, and a full budget non-COVID, and then cut it in half, 6 months, 6 months. There is no COVID-19 excess to apply to 2021, which was identified by Mr. Black as we walked through the 2020 results. We also assumed that we would maintain the 15% reserve contribution increase from 2020, not your assessment increasing 15%, but the contributions from operations to reserves would be 15%, which is what we projected last year for 2021. 70% property insurance renewal increase. We'll touch on that a little bit later, but we did receive news from our insurance brokers that we would anticipate the significant increase in premiums. And finally, we had to identify what was dining services going to look like. So we also went with a 6-month approach, which was 6 months from January through June, we would have a 25% dining room operations, and then a 100% dining room operation from July thereon. Based on those assumptions, we reached our regular assessment and dining service fee assessment results. As you saw what the board approved and in the materials that were distributed to you on Friday, your regular assessment or your unit assessment is going up 6.19% from 2020, and your dining services fee is going down $10 or 1.23%. And I think what's important to note is at this time, there's no projected special assessment for the community. Let's talk about some of these expenses and the major highlights. The first couple of rows here actually show some significant reductions. We compliment the managers for really digging into their operations to identify how does COVID-19 truly affect many of their line items in their department. And we see that if it wasn't for a couple items at the later on in this list, our compensation for 2021, which is in this column right here, as compared to 2020, gives you a dollar difference, but more importantly, a percentage decrease or increase. Compensation is essentially flat from 2020 to 2021. You'll see that ratio in our chart later on about what that effect is for Smith Ranch Homes. Taxes and workers' comp is actually going down $56,000 or 13% due to great workers' comp results that we're projecting. Our agency reduction is $100,000 or 6% due to utilizing less agency during these 6 months of COVID expectations in 2021. Cost of goods we've already talked about going down $50,000 or 4%. And then the overall services and supplies are going down $56,000 or 10% due to the realities we're facing in 2021. That's the good news. The challenging news, though, is our property insurance, which I alluded to earlier. Due to the significant losses that we've incurred due to the Villa fire sprinklers and some other losses as well, we're projecting a $215,000 increase or a 50% increase in property insurance alone. That 15% reserve contribution increase that I alluded to earlier materially is $160,000. So that has a major effect on the budget. And then the capital improvements that Mr. Black mentioned earlier. This year we were required to do some City of San Rafael elevator work, but then there's a remaining amount for the rest of our elevators in 2021. That's $89,000 or a whopping 445% over 2020's capital improvement budget of $20,000. The revenues, as Mr. Black pointed out earlier, also takes a hit during COVID-affected operations. Our service income, which is housekeeping fees, guest room fees, resale fees, we're projecting to be $46,000 lower than 2020 or 23%. The lounge revenue, the beverage, special events, etc., is going down $48,000. And there's even more dining revenue that we've decreased $107,000 or 32%. What's driving the 6.19% increase? Clearly, this is not a number that you see regularly. We will give you a historical perspective a little bit later. But just these 4 line items that I've showed you, the ancillary revenues, the property insurance, the capital improvements, and the reserve contributions, all total 6.1% of your unit assessment. Will we expect these same dollar amounts in the future? I can't ascertain the future. I know we would not anticipate any more capital improvements regarding the elevators next year. Our reserve contributions will continue to infuse reserves with cash, but we perhaps won't project the same ancillary issues as well as our property insurance premiums next year as well. So often you've heard about a zero-based budgeting program that we have here, which is true. Individual accounts are looked at from a zero-based perspective where you don't add 3% and call it a day to a 2020 budget figure. But here we actually have a net zero funding requirement, which means we ascertain our expenses, 6.8% to operate all the departments less dining services, how much money we need to contribute to reserves, our capital expenses. 3.2 of a dining services operation determines that we have an $11.4 million cash requirement. I've said this in many other presentations in the past. A former treasurer used to say this quite a bit, who's maybe watching this at home. This is not a mom and pop operation. $11 million to operate Smith Ranch Homes on an annual basis. The only way to offset this liability for you is revenues, but we've shown how these revenues have taken a hit. So we can offset a little bit, a couple $100,000, but the rest of the assessment is upon the residents to afford. $7.9 million in regular assessments and $2.9 million for dining services fees means that we will bring in the 11.4 to meet the 11.4. We're not adding more to this so that we have excess in future years. Macro snapshot of the budget. We have 105 full-time equivalent employees here at Smith Ranch Homes. 86 are actual Smith Ranch Homes employees. 19 are contract employees like landscaping or patrol services. But we have quite a workforce that makes Smith Ranch Homes operate. But I want to be mindful about what our operating department results were based off of these increases that we projected earlier. The maintenance department really worked hard to identify what do we need to budget for in 2021 on a 35-year-old community. Typically, maintenance fees will continue to be increasing dramatically. They have a reasonable projection of only 1.2% increase over 2020's funding. Housekeeping is reducing themselves $16,000 or 1.2, primarily due to the reduction of agency work. Resident services essentially is at a break even, and administration has a $162,000 increase. No, that's not for a hot tub in John Mara's office. That's merely where we line item our property insurance premiums, and that's where you see the big increase there. Dining services, as we've identified, is a reduction of 5%. Why is dining services going down though? Let's boil it down to a couple of bullet points. With COVID-19 restrictions, even with cost increases going up and supply chains a little out of whack, our projected food cost is going down 4% or $45,000. Compensation is going down 30%, primarily due to the reduction of agency for the first 6 months to the tune of $150,000. Other expenses are going up $10,000, immaterial. So really our operations is operating at $185,000 less of a cash need. And if that was where the story ended, that'd be even better news. That would mean your dining services fee would be reduced $20 per person or 2.3%. But as we showed, unfortunately, we're taking a haircut on some revenues as well. So we've reduced the revenue budget by $150,000 or 32%. That essentially leaves you $35,000 still though, with less cash needs versus 2020. Thus, by keeping a same resident census of 295, you now have a lower $10 meal assessment. Word about reserves. A lot of people have questions about reserves. I think you should. This is a major arm at Smith Ranch Homes. The objective at Smith Ranch Homes is to achieve a baseline funding objective. What the heck does that mean? I'll show you on a subsequent slide, but we achieved it. We're also 23.2% funded. That may make some people at home nervous, but I want to explain to you why we feel comfortable with a baseline funding objective and a 23% funding percentage is adequate for Smith Ranch Homes. First, we also make some assumptions in our reserves. Over the course of 30 years, we're assuming a 2% investment income rate. We're currently not making 2% now, but over 30 years, we're expecting that within our investment policy. We also are inflating our expenses year over year 3% so that we can continue to maintain an expected expense liability over the course of 30 years and not just using today's numbers. In 2021 alone, we have $1.9 million scheduled. 1.2 of that is merely the elevator modernization project, which is coming off the books at the end of next year. $283,000 is for the phase 2 and 3 villa roofs, which we're doing half of in 2021 and the other half in 2022 based on an architectural assessment. And finally, $300,000 is making up approximately for HVAC components throughout the property. No, don't worry. I am not going through all of this and you will not be tested on this. But I do want to point, and I hope it's being projected well for your TVs at home, is this final column, the total reserve balance. We mentioned earlier, baseline funding objections. Our objection for our baseline is to never go negative over the course of 30 years. 2060, when Chris Ellingson is the president of Smith Ranch Homes Board of Directors, and maybe I'll be the secretary. If I haven't done the math, that even makes sense for me. We'll be pretty low. But as we've seen, we build up reserves and then we cut into reserves as we go on based on our inflated expenditures. So merely the fact of a negative number not occurring allows us to feel comfortable that we are okay with the 23% funding. What this allows for, though, is a low ability to absorb unforeseen expenses. And we work very hard at Smith Ranch Homes to shake the trees of as many known reserve expenses in the future to limit that. But anything outside of this study may result in a special assessment. You've heard enough of me talking right now, and I need a sip of water. So I'm going to pass this to Mr. Black and have him give you kind of a historical perspective of what 6.19 and 123 may be at Smith Ranch Homes.
Thank you, Scott. Yes, notice on this slide, we show the regular assessment of 6.19%. In the prior years, 2019, for instance, we had a 4.79% increase, and 2020, a 5.79%. Mindful looking at the proposed Social Security increase of 1.3% for 2021, which makes it kind of scary. However, I do want to point out that the COVID-19, while it has made life very difficult for everybody here, residents and staff, if we hadn't had some of the savings from that, we'd be looking at a 7, 8, 9% assessment here. Also, with the very fine work in the dining area to reduce further the expenses there, so we can take another $10 off the monthly meal thing. It was quite an achievement, or will be quite an achievement. I do want to add that when we realized that the COVID-19 was going to continue into 2021, we had assumed that we were going to go back to a normal budget. And the directive from John and Scott to all the managers was find some more money off your budget. And they diligently all went back to it. I want to stress that we do zero-based budgeting here, which means unless you need the bucks for something, you don't get it. And so it wasn't that if you have $10,000 last year, you can put another 10 in this year. You had to justify that money. And so the managers really did a terrific job in coming up with this budget that we have. And so we can go to the trends here. Excuse me. Plan 7 is sort of the average of our plans here. And you can see for 2019, 2020, and 2021, we've gone from a 4.79% to a 6.19 in 2021. The dining in the past in 2019 had a 3% increase. In 2020, we had a 2.3% increase, and this year we actually found some money to reduce it.
And I want to point out, this is an average 4-year increase, although we have 3 years of history. Your take-home pages, page 2, which was a summary, gives you that 2018 year as well. So we did want to show you the 4-year history, although there's 3 years here. This is an important page, 10 of 46, because this is nice about a Unit 7, but how does that affect you? And out of all the materials that we gave to you on Friday, the page that I would encourage everybody to explore is page 10 of 46. It's listed by unit types, but it gives you your square footage as well. This will tell you your unit monthly assessment for 2021 specifically. So Mr. Black, I'll pass it back to you though, so that we can identify what is the actual cash flow example for a resident at home using the Plan 7 condo and maybe a villa too.
Right. On this slide, excuse me, excuse me. See the single floor plan 7 condo showing the 2020 assessment of $2,543 for the unit. On 2021, we estimated at $2,700, so it'd be a $157 increase per month, or on an annualized basis, close to $1,900. And the meal plan, $843 goes to $833, $10, a saving of $124 on an annual basis, reducing your annualized increase to $1,765. Now the villas, which are larger units generally, and we've also included a 2-people meal plan rather than 1. So in 2020, they had $3,300 for their unit, going to $3,500 in 2021, a $206 increase, annualized $2,462. On the meals, having 2 people in 2020, $1,686 down to $1,665 for $21 reduction, or annualized $248. And you can see the bottom line, $5,000 in 2020, $5,185 in 2021. Monthly difference is $185, and that comes up to $2,400 and some odd dollars there. So there is an increase. It's unfortunate, but I do want to stress that I think the staff and everybody involved, including the finance committee, worked diligently to make this a 6.19 and not a 7 or 8% increase. I'll let Scott go through the summary for year dollar, how it is broken up.
Sure, yeah, I really enjoy this slide because while everybody pays different dollar amounts based on the size of your unit, maybe meal plan, but this boils it down to essentially what does one of your dollars go to? And I like to look at it as cents. So 31 cents of your dollar goes towards compensation at Smith Ranch Homes, which we showed you was flat overall from 2020 to 2021. Also add in with compensation, there's also payroll tax and benefits of 9%. So essentially 40% or 40 cents of your dollars are going towards just the staff here at Smith Ranch Homes. The yellow is utilities. We haven't touched on utilities, but we've actually done pretty good on forecasting our utility expenses this year. We're projecting the same, but still it's a material amount of 9 cents of your dollar goes towards keeping the lights on, literally, at Smith Ranch Homes. The 11%, I know I'm kind of bouncing around here, but the brown color here is your reserves. So 11 cents of your dollar is going towards contributing to reserves. So I do think there's a whole lot that you can glean out of this, which again will be available to you on the website, but also your handouts that were included with your package has this breakdown for you. One of the items that I think Mr. Black touched on was about having the strategy of having a 6 and 6 budget plan. And what that may available for us is also if we realize halfway through the year or at any point in the year that we maybe missed the mark, or maybe there was a vaccine that came in March or doesn't come until August, we have a full COVID and a full non-COVID budget on the shelves that the managers did put together when we challenged them to shake the trees in 2020 and then really shake it harder in 2021. So we're pretty confident that this is a great moderate plan that goes into a reasonable position for 2021, But if at any point the finance committee or the board feels that there needs to be an adjustment, we don't need to recalculate a budget. We're ready to go. And management will respond to however the finance committee and the board recommends.
Thank you for your attention to our presentation today. I hope you gained some knowledge from it. I do want to stress again the difficult year that the staff and management went through this year and worked so diligently to minimize the impact of this change we're going through on your pocketbook. And while the 6.919% is a big number, and versus especially looking at Social Security only going up 1.3, but I will stress that the staff and the management of each of these things worked diligently to make sure that we kept things really very tightly run. It's very important that we keep this residence up. We don't want it to become a second class thing. We want to spend the money that's required so that we can stress that our high level of environment, that we keep it going. But anyway, thank you very much for it. Thanks Scott for putting this all together and all the work he did. I greatly appreciate it.
Thanks, Mr. Black, and I appreciate the nice comments. A group of people that played a huge role in this is our finance committee, led by Glenn Phillips, the chairperson. On the finance committee, we have Mr. Holden, Mr. Scholes, Mr. Mallon, and Mr. Torrance. Thank you very much. And Mr. Brown was a part of our finance committee earlier this year as well, too. So kudos just to that group who really helped provide some great leadership. Again, if we're going to give thank yous, Chris Ellingson, thanks a lot for putting this all together. We're going to put this up on the website, not just the slides, but the whole presentation at some point, so you can come back to this and see what kind of letter grade we earned, Mr. Black. You know, they can come back and judge us on our forecast in July of next year. So thank you for the time, and please contact us if you have any questions.
Thank you.
Stay healthy.